breaking out of prison is something that we mostly see in movies and shows, which is to say that it's not at all common to pull off something like that nowadays. But think about this. What if there was someone who broke out of prison not once, but twice, and managed to stay on the run for more than a decade? Sounds hard to believe, right?
There's a massive manhunt underway right now in Mexico following the brazen prison break that freed one of the world's most notorious drug lords.
Well, that is what the infamous drug lord El Chapo precisely did. Joaquin Guzman Loera, better known as El Chapo, was the CEO of one of the most successful drug cartels the world had ever seen. The man was once also referred to as Public Enemy Number 1. The Sinaloa cartel, which was led by him, was estimated to be trafficking a quarter of all the drugs that entered the United States soil. According to estimates, the cartel's monthly revenues exceeded $300 million at one point. After escaping prison for the second time in 2015, El Chapo, as the result of an international manhunt, was again captured a few months later and put inside a prison with security so insane that it's highly unlikely that another escape is ever going to be on the mind of the former Mexican drug lord. We're talking about one of the most high-security correctional facilities on the planet.
He's locked up in the most reliable prison we have in Mexico.
ADX Florence. But have you ever wondered why the place is so heavily guarded that it's impossible to escape?
This prison had plenty of security measures in place above the ground. They had ways of blocking.
Well, it's simple. ADX Florence holds individuals whose scary tales are told to children to get them to act right. El Chapo isn't the only monster who resides in ADX Florence. Other well-known inmates are the Unabomber and Dr. Death. These names may sound like something out of a comic book, and that's because the crimes of these men are so ridiculously heinous that they are in fact comical. ADX Florence is located in the southern part of Florence, Colorado. The Supermax prison stretches over 37 acres of land, and is known for the tough conditions the inmates are held in. They are held in solitary confinement for most of the 24 hours that are in a day, and the only hour they're allowed is in a location which appears as an empty swimming pool. Unlike most prisons, ADX Florence has no mess hall, and inmates get food hand-delivered by guards. It has cameras and motion detectors all around, remote-controlled steel doors, and giant fences. Not only that, attack dogs roam the area surrounding the prison's outlying fences at all times. You may be wondering how someone can survive in such a hellish place as this. And well, that's a good question to ask. The facility aims to deprive inmates of their senses and leave them with nothing but their own thoughts, which may get them to have mental issues. Conditions for El Chapo are even worse than all the other criminals ADX Florence is housing. El Chapo is reported to be in the harshest unit in the prison, Range 13, which is a specially designed 4-cell wing within a special housing unit. It is where the worst of the worst are thrown. The reason why El Chapo is in a place like this is because of his bad history with max security prisons. Back in 1993, he was locked up in Puente Grande, which to this day holds the reputation of one of Mexico's toughest prisons. There, like every other inmate, 2 guards kept their eye on him at all times, and his movements were also monitored by a technologically advanced surveillance system. 8 years later, El Chapo decided he had spent enough time in Puente Grande and got himself smuggled out of there. Many believe that he bribed the people who worked at the prison to get rid of security cameras, hide him in a laundry cart, and put it in a truck. After this, he proceeded to evade authorities for 13 years. He was captured once again in 2014 and put inside an L-shaped cell at Altiplano Federal Penitentiary. Everyone thought that there was no way El Chapo could escape from there, but just 17 months later, he disappeared once again, and the escape was on a whole new level of crazy yet smart.
So this is the tunnel that Joaquin Chapo Guzman came out of. We're gonna go down and take a closer look.
His associates dug a mile-long tunnel from a construction site to right underneath the prison. This ingenious escape route took no less than $50 million to build and was intentionally placed in the blind spot of the security camera of El Chapo's cell. Something like this could only happen if the prison officials were in on it. The prime suspect in this whole thing was a then employee of Puente Grande, Damaso Lopez, who authorities believe to have gotten his hands on an accurate copy of the prison's blueprints before he resigned from his job. According to the New York Times, Lopez had a deep knowledge of the layout of the prison and its security prisons, as well as the exact GPS coordinates of El Chapo's shower stall. speculation says that prior to leaving his job, Lopez made a deal with El Chapo's men that would set him up for life, in which he would be given extraordinary assets in return for the blueprints of the prison he once worked at and housed El Chapo. If you or I were granted not a second but a third shot at freedom, we would probably decide to stay off the radar and live the rest of our days in as much peace as we could, but that wasn't at all what El Chapo did. He jumped right back into his drug business as soon as he got out, which prompted the legal system to give it their all in catching him and putting an end to the whole joke he was making out of them by sending him to a prison with security so tight that even an ant couldn't enter or leave without guards being alerted. How they recaptured him for a third time was as dramatic as you'd expect. After being tipped off on his location, the Mexican army surrounded El Chapo and his men, who were also there, and got into a shootout, which looked as if it was straight out of a high-budget action movie. The end of this gunfight was, as you all know, the capture of El Chapo.
Here's the poster just released, El Chapo now caught, but it came after a bloody shootout.
The Mexican authorities knew that the only way to keep El Chapo off the streets was for them to extradite him to the United States, where he would have no way to ever see the sun again. So they did. The prison that was waiting for him in the States was, as we've told you, ADX Florence. No one has ever escaped from there in history. If you've ever heard of Alcatraz, which you probably have through pop culture, then ADX Florence is nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The cell in which the drug lord is being kept is designed in such a way that it could be used as a setting for a science fiction novel based on inescapable prisons, if that is even a thing. It is said to have technology so advanced that the world hasn't even heard about some of it yet. But what we do know about El Chapo's personal cell is that the only luxuries he has in there are a desk and a stool, which are made out of concrete, as well as a bed, which is also carved out of the same hard concrete. So it's probably not the comfy mattress that most of us are probably accustomed to sleeping on. If that sounds rather uncomfortable, then even his toilet is built to shut off if plugged. Heck, even his showers have timers on them. The cell has mirrors and lights, and also a radio, and from what we've heard, sometimes even a television which is provided so that the person inside doesn't completely lose their sanity. But keep in mind that things like these are only provided if the convict shows some sort of good behavior, which the convicts at ADX Florence most certainly don't do much of. Another surprising thing that shows just how insane the prison is when it comes to security is that every single cell is soundproofed. The reason behind this is that it prevents the prisoners using Morse code or anything of that nature to communicate. So if you're thinking that you might have the brains to break out of ADX Florence, you don't. So all in all, it doesn't look like El Chapo is going to ever be able to use his previous strategies of being smuggled out of the place with the laundry plan or through a tunnel. It's more than likely that he will have to spend the rest of his life in ADX Florence. That brings us to the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future videos. If you enjoyed the content, then do leave a like. So until next time, take care and goodbye.